This is Politics at the Bar, sponsored by Angry Cactus, featuring Tim Condon and mayoral candidate Trinidad Aguirre. Well, thank you so much for coming,
I
Trinidad.
appreciate you, Tim. It's
We've
good.
known each other for, well, since 2010. I came to San Angelo, and I was at Verizon where you were there at that time. So we've
Yeah.
known each other for a while.
I think when you came in, I was the president. You actually worked for my brother.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
that goes a long way back. But, you know, it was a good start for you. And when I think about it, it really shows how far you've come.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
thank you.
I look at this place and I go, wow, this is what entrepreneurship is really like. This is fun.
Well, the funny part about that whole thing is the only reason I had that job at Verizon is I moved here from Honolulu, and I had this whole business plan to open this food truck, and we were alone. It was for Lone Star Cheeseburger at the time, back in 2010, and I realized there's no food trucks in San Angelo, and being from Honolulu, where I think we had 600 and something permitted food trucks in 2010 in Honolulu County alone, which is the island of Oahu. I saw such a business opportunity, but the bank wouldn't give me the loan because I didn't have a job because I moved over here. And so I was talking with my old banker, Don Johnson. He's like, well, just go get a job somewhere. There's got to be a couple chef's places, get a couple paychecks. And so I worked there, I think, for 3 months or something with your brother and all that. And it was fun. I got to cook and do everything I got to do. And then, gave them a 30-day notice or whatever after I got my paycheck stubs and got the loan and opened Lone Star Cheeseburger.
You know, one of the things that he reminds me of is that you were honest.
Yeah.
He told us, I mean, when you sat down with him, you said, this is what I'm trying to do. This is the duration.
Yeah.
And it worked. Honesty, transparency, whatever you want to call it, it works.
Yeah.
So there was you didn't come in and then sneak out the back door. You came in the front door.
Yeah.
You stayed what you wanted to do, and you achieved. And I love that transparency.
Well, and I think all business owners can kind of relate to that. Is you have to be somewhat transparent and fully transparent in a lot of ways, but you have to be transparent in the what you're doing, where you're doing it, why you're doing it. And if you're not, then you get into this gray area of what are your intentions and so on and so forth.
And one of the biggest challenges that someone coming into the political arena has is how do you gain trust?
Yeah.
Because people don't vote on anything but trust. Who do I trust to take me forward? And with you, that's what it was all about. You came in, you built that trust with your banker, with yourself, with everyone else, and it worked. That's what I liked about everything that I've read. And when I was talking to my brother, he was telling me, he says, we built a trust.
Yeah. So and I think that's definitely a key element for sure. So you worked at Verizon though, so you're from San Angelo, is that correct?
Correct.
And then you went to ASU, and then you eventually worked at Verizon, right? Tell me a little bit about that. You ran a few states.
When I was in the Navy, got out of the Navy, didn't have a job back then during the Vietnam War. We really didn't have any opportunities. You left the war and people didn't acknowledge you. So I came back to San Angelo, actually went to Lubbock, and I worked for Texas Instruments. Came back to San Angelo, this was home. And I had gotten my GI Bill through the Navy. So that's when I started going to Angelo State University. But I worked on Tuig Street. I was a technician on Tuig Street, and that was my humble beginnings. I actually worked on the cord boards way back when, and then went to manager, director, vice president, and then ended up being the president of Verizon. But that's kind of where I started. It was right here in San Angelo, not what is it, the next street over?
Yeah, totally, just right up the street.
It is. That's where I started, next to Zell's.
Nice.
So it was nice. That was kind of where I started. It was a great career, and Verizon really treated me well over the years.
And I think that's always an important aspect, is to be in a company that you're treated well and you cared about. So.
What's funny though, when I think about Verizon and my career path, once I started with Verizon, went up through a certain level, but then I achieved the president of Texas, and that was fun. I said, okay, now I'm done. I've reached the president of Texas. Well, our Midwest division, which is Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, those states up there, they weren't doing so well. So they came to me and they said, Trinidad, can you take over this whole area? And I said, okay. So I took over Texas and them. And after about a year and a half, we were doing real well up there. Then they came back and said, Trinidad, Florida's not doing well. Can you take over Florida? I said, man, that's a big ask. And so I took over Florida. And then after another year and a half, 2 years, we had now Texas, the Midwest, and Florida, and they were doing pretty good. Then they came back the last time and they said, "Can you take over California?" And I said, "Yeah, that's a stretch. That's a lot of travel time." And so that's how I ended up with all of the states. I started in Texas. My achievements, my accomplishments, whatever you want to call it, took over the Midwest and then Florida and then California. And then we used a kind of a visionary, kind of a how do we group all of these people together and make them cohesive? And it's no different than a city. I mean, in the city, you've got all of these departments, and how do you make happy employees out of them? And that's what we bring in because it was a challenge. I
Yeah.
mean, when Florida and California don't see eye to eye sometimes.
Yeah. So when you're running Verizon, obviously you have revenue coming in from all the phone bills and all of the phone services, and probably revenue in a variety of different ways.
Oh yes.
But you got all this revenue coming in, and of course you're investing in, and your costs are in the infrastructure aspect, right? All the towers and all of that. So it was your basic job to just kind of watch the revenue that was being brought in and watch the expenses on the infrastructure side, and that kind of make that
Tim,
profitable, or how what was your basic job in that way?
well, I as a president, I had the marketing, the sales, the operations, and the finance. So I had the full gamut. But it's no different than an entrepreneur having the same items that they have to ensure that we're doing it. So I had them all.
Nice.
And I think the interesting thing when you start looking at the finances, especially, my job was to sit down and pour over stacks, reams of paper this big,
Yeah.
and say, what doesn't fit? What doesn't work? Why is this? It could be one small city in the state of California. Why is this city not up to par? And what do I need to cut? What do I need to add? And a lot of times, Tim, it wasn't that I needed to cut, but I needed to add, because sometimes growth is good and sometimes growth is not good. But that's kind of what I did. I would sit down and take a look at number by number, and I had a team of specialists with me, and we'd pour over it for 2-3 weeks. As soon as we had the results, and it was fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I needed that. Thank you.
Well, cheers. Thanks for coming
Salute.
out and
Thank
talking.
you.
So, all right. So you did Verizon for a while, and then I know you've been active in local politics for a while. Ran for city council. I know you're on a variety of boards. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you were part of the chamber for a while, and so on and so forth. So, I guess what have you done in that arena? What, besides running for city council, and you were with the chamber for a while, right?
I was in the Chamber of Commerce on the executive board, and we were there through 2 different presidents for the chamber, and we went through that cycle. Then I was on the planning commission board,
Okay.
and that was fun. Striblin was the head of that, and we really looked at different aspects of it. We looked at the sidewalks. We looked at all the different rules, the infield, and there's a lot of when I take a look at what people have to face because of the permits and because of the planning and because of I would call it an overreach of government in regulations. When you take a look at that, it's wrong. So what it gave me was the ability to deep dive when I was on that group and say, why are we doing this? And it was because what it was doing, it was raising the prices of the homes,
Yeah.
which made them unaffordable.
Yeah.
And then the other one was the charter. I was actually part of the team that rewrote the charter, and it was our group that brought in term limits.
And what was that? 2016.
That was
it 2016 that we rewrote that charter?
And it was a good. I mean, I when I think of the teammates I had on that, it was excellent. We accomplished things that I'm to this day I'm extremely proud of. But it was something that I thoroughly enjoyed. Now that taught me the charter. There's a lot of people that come back and say, well, you're breaking the rules. Well, no, I know the rules, but Tim,
it's the intent that matters, right?
That's where I was going with.
Yeah.
A lot of people will come back in and they'll pound their fist on the desk and they'll say, the charter doesn't allow you to do this. Well, the charter doesn't actually say no.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I like to do is I like to follow the intent
Mhm.
of the law, not the letter of the law.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a big difference. I mean, sometimes people will tell you, no, you can't do this. No,
Yeah.
you can't. Well, why not?
Well,
And
let's go down that rabbit hole as our first
all
rabbit hole
right,
because that was on my list. Is the whole planning department, kind of like what's the role of government in that aspect in that arena? Like in my opinion, currently, and still to this day, I think I really believe that like there's a lot of overreach, a lot of unnecessary regulation, just in general. I
yep.
can give you example after example on where the planning department has gotten in the way. A lot of people come to me and say, you know, they're frustrated with the planning department, but it's a lot of it may be inefficiency, but some of it to me is just impractical. You know, there's just so much there that doesn't necessarily need to be enforced. Doesn't necessarily. I mean, our government, in my opinion, is getting a little out of control. You know, going back to the whole planning subject. You know, what like what are your thoughts on you know if we're gonna try to cut taxes, that means we're gonna have to cut services to some degree. You know, where can we take the chainsaw to say specific departments in the city and become more efficient and not have to spend so much money? Is it really necessary that we have code enforcement going out and making sure people's grass is cut? You know, shouldn't that be a homeowners association
Well,
thing? Like where does this line
you know,
stop?
and I think enforcement is one of them. We need inspectors, but at the same token, you know, we're overreached. I mean, there are people that ensure that you don't have two garage sales or more a year.
Yeah, what a
I mean,
waste of money,
why
right?
do we have that? We have a regulation, you know, even on your cell phone, that it's illegal to text. But the police force can't do anything about that. But you know, when I take a look at the planning department, they're saying they're 4 people short, and that's why we're so we can't approve anybody's plans. And you'll hear terms like there's millions of dollars that the planning department is going to approve eventually. Why eventually? Why not now? What is so wrong that we can't get these plans from the developers out immediately? You know, and I get really upset, but I would
Well,
take a
isn't
look.
it in their own interest to design something that's appropriate and that's up to code and that's, I mean, that's all done. That can be that process can be cut in half and be much more efficient. And you know,
Yeah,
what do you need five or
that
six
that's
people
that's
to do those things for?
that's the other thing. I mean, uh, I develop stuff, so from time to time I've come back in, and I purchased a building. It was a metal building. It had already been in full compliance. It was taking me 3 to 4 months just to get the final approval, and I finally said to hell with them. Find me. I'm going up with this bill. I can't wait anymore.
Yeah,
You know, and it's but to your point, you're right. We should be able to fill a form online. We should be able to track it from the beginning to the end. And what we're doing right now is if and you went through it, I'm sure that if they find one thing wrong, the clock starts over. They find something else,
yeah, yeah,
and instead of a because we're quoting 3 to 4 days,
yeah,
I think it's sometimes people have been waiting 8 or 9 months and
yeah.
they still don't have it because we have this chicken clock that keeps changing. But I would like to see a process that you come in, you put a form in, you know, we take a look at it, we get the right team, and maybe it's a back office team, and then within the next 24, 48 hours, we've got a response back to you. But we need all those people to do that? No. The other thing I'm against is we have the fox in the hen house. You know, the inspectors, they're, you know, when they come in and they go inspect something, who do they report to? The same person. I'd like to see a totally different department that comes in and says, we're going to inspect, because now they're isolated and they can do the right things. But currently, we've lumped everybody together. They
Yeah.
know each other and they cover for each other. And to me, we got to. That's an area I would totally redo.
Well, see what my whole approach is you know I hear all three of the mayoral candidates kind of their different positions on kind of what the tax situation
Yep.
is. You're very vocal that we don't need any more taxes. You know, you need to stop the bleeding. We need to cut off the revenue to the city, basically. Or, I mean, figure out other ways to get revenue, right? But not from the taxpayer's pocket, as far as the residents go. And if you're going to do that, you have to make some sort of cut somewhere. In my mind, it seems feasible that take the, I think we all agree we need parks and we need the roads and streets and we need the public safety, the police. I don't think that any of us want to cut those departments,
No,
but the departments that are dealing with all this additional regulation, it's just a bunch of bookwork that, yeah, may be necessary, but it might not be necessary. If I'm going to build a restaurant here in San Angelo, I'm going to make sure everything's up to code because it's my building. I want to make sure that I don't burn my building down. I'm going to have insurance on my building. I'm going to take all the precautions necessary. Even if I build a house, I'm going to want to make sure
absolutely.
I have an inspector come in and make sure that everyone's doing things to code and to all of that. But what is necessarily the need for the city to come over? Now I know there's some need, and there is a need for planning, and there is a need for all of these things. But I think we can cut it
You
in
know,
a certain way.
one of the things that I laugh because I take a look at my competitors, and one of them is telling me that everything is good, and that that I'm wrong. That maybe the planning and permitting department doesn't need to be changed. That it's okay. It's just that we're short of people. When I take a look at I've talked to several companies that want to come in, actually three, and they've come back that they don't want to deal with it, and they move on because of all those regulations you're talking about. You mentioned like the police department. Back in August, our mayor came back and said that she was tired of funding the police and she wanted them to give you more tickets. She said, so the way that you guys need to be funded is go give our citizens more tickets. Make it a profit center instead of a center in which we protect our
Yeah,
folks.
yeah.
What was behind that?
Well, it shouldn't be I don't believe the police should be a revenue generating
I don't either.
department of the city. I can see planning being a revenue generating department of the city, but not more tickets for the citizens.
Well, that
That's a
was part
tax.
of as a tax. And so from a tax cutoff, one of the things that I get really mad again is that we need affordable housing. That's something we need. Well, we have regulations that prevent it.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have is a sidewalk ordinance. We've modified that over the years, but we still have a sidewalk ordinance.
Or the green space
Oh,
issue.
the green space is another one. The water runoff is
Yeah.
another one. We can't get our
You're
arms
talking
around
about
that.
like the retention ponds
The
necessary
retention
for.
ponds, all of those. The big one that everybody is fighting right now is the lot sizes. They're coming back in and they're saying the builders are saying, can we reduce the lot size? And
Make it smaller.
make it smaller. Like I think I'm not sure which Senate bill it is, but there's a bill in Austin right now that says in some of the larger cities, and we would take a look at it, see if it fits us, but make it at 1,400 square feet instead of 3,000 or 4,000. So and that would be in special areas. But what would it be like if we took, say, 10 acres and we went to a 1,400 square foot? We could build all sorts of affordable housing. Do it nice, do it right,
Yeah, yeah.
but at the same time, it's a cost saving that Austin is taking a look at. San Antonio, Dallas, all of the big cities are the same issue we are.
I can see that being feasible just because small homes are a thing, and for me, I'm a very non-materialist. So I mean, I don't need a big house. I just need the smallest thing I need. Now I don't have to clean much and all that stuff.
Well, the other one is there's another Senate bill that says that a single family home. I don't know how big your lot is, but let's say that I have a one house that's on 3/4 of an acre, and I just bought it. I'm still fixing it up, but on 3/4 of an acre, they're saying one house per lot. Well, there's another Senate bill that's going to come back and say you can put in a mother-in-law suite, or you can do something else and rent it out, or bring it out. So it's a way that a lot of the seniors.
But is that all state regulations?
It's all state, but maybe not for San Angelo because we're too small, and they're trying to fight. But if they did that, I mean, it would be a way for people to keep their houses because by the time they pay their taxes, insurance, and all of the electricity, water, they can no longer afford their home. So we've got to find a way to help them.
On that particular issue, and I haven't heard this issue before, but so if the state, whatever the state does, if they say yes or no to this issue on the lot sizes, does that mean that San Angelo has it, the city of San Angelo has a choice to adopt that or not adopt it, or is it whatever the state says that we have to go with it?
The state is going to tell the larger cities they will. It will be a mandate. The size of San Angelo, I think it has to be greater than 60, but the county has to be, I think, like 300,000 people. We don't fall in that category. So we would have the opportunity to look at it and say, does it make sense? Can we do this in San Angelo? And then, you know,
But right now, you can't have. What's the minimum size of lot you can have in San Angelo?
I think it's 18 or 20. I'd have to go back and confirm that. But it's basically, I guess in layman's terms, you could take two houses and make three. So, you know, if you took two lots, we would now put three side by side. You know, a good visual for you, think of New York City. What are those they call, what, shotgun homes or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
they are? So, you know, if you came back in and made rows of nice homes, and we're talking nice homes,
yeah.
we would be able to do that. So just a two or a three for two.
Well, I mean, just to play devil's advocate on that whole mindset, wouldn't you think that builders would be doing that already if that was the case? Like, or are you saying that
It's
they're
illegal
currently
today.
it's illegal?
Overreach by our government, overreach by our planning department says no. You will follow these guidelines. The other one is the setbacks. You will have this setback, you know, from the curb to the house. You
Yeah.
will have this setback, this set.
But regardless of what that is, that's still a regulation. Whether it's a
That's why
like
we can't do
my
it.
my philosophy is just we don't need any of those rules. Let
Right.
the open market dictate what the lot size is. I mean, that's why I feel you know I have a tendency to brag about being a libertarian, but I believe in a very limited government. You know,
I
I'm
do
a
too.
very liberal person on social issues, very conservative person on economic issues. I don't find anything where I think authoritarianism is correct, but I do see a lot of validity in libertarianism.
Well, I think what the overreach does is if you do anything, I have a law that says you can't.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's what we've done to ourselves. You try to do anything, let me go through my archives and I will find a reason you can't do it.
yeah.
And that's wrong. We
Well,
need to stop that.
I feel that that's the city's uh, general idea, anyways. Is they're looking, especially in planning, going back to the planning, is they're looking for reasons to say no, not reasons
Yes.
to say yes, which always has been a frustrating thing as an entrepreneur because you should be in teamwork with the city. And I know San Angelo gets a very bad rap about not being a business friendly city, and I could say that's definitely the case, especially anecdotally with my experience. I'm opening a Angry Cactus in Abilene right now, and I had less than a 5-minute phone call with the city, and we got our permits no problem. So
That's what
you
we're
know,
talking
like
about.
I don't understand why we can't figure it out. But I always go back to the whole idea that we just have too much regulation. There's just too many things to deal with. Where you know, if I'm going back to the idea, if I'm building a restaurant, I'm going to make sure that my restaurant doesn't fall down. I'm going to make sure, like, what do we need the city to make sure that happens? You know, like, anyways, that's just my
No, but I agree, and that's why you know it's kind of what you said. You called it in, someone put it into the computer, somebody looked at it, and it's done.
yeah,
Why do I need to call? I think right now we call a group of people of all the experts. We'll sit down with you. Then you have to take it through different groups. You know, the downtown group. You know,
yeah,
will it pass? Is it the right cut? You know, there's certain rules we need to follow.
yeah.
I understand that. You know, the historic side of it, but we're way. We've crossed that line several years ago, and we need to draw back. But it's going to take the mayor's leadership to drive that aspect of it. Our current mayor is not there yet.
Well, what other departments in the city do you think there's fat to be cut? Like, in what aspects? I mean, I think we've kind of come to the conclusion. We agree public safety doesn't necessarily need to be touched. You know,
No.
you know, I mean, I know they're always looking for more funds, and I mean, that's unfortunately what happens when you deal with government in general. Is like, you know, there's not really incentive to be more efficient. There's just incentive to get more revenue.
Well, when everything is kind of so intermingled, it's kind of hard to break anything out of it. For example, the dog shelter is under the human side of it. That's under, and so when I start looking at that, one of the things that I would like to do before I started cutting was separation of roles and responsibilities. Like the park department, one of the things that the Lake Nasworthy people are very upset about, and so are the citizens, is, that robo thing that they're putting on the entrance to the lake. If you want to go to the lake, you need to use a credit card, or you need to use some sort of
Oh yeah,
device.
yeah.
And you come out, guess what? Are you trying to come back in?
Hmm.
You got to do it again.
Mm.
And if you do that 3 or 4 times, if you just want to say I just like to go around the lake and visit, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's overreach. Do we need a park department? That needs to be, who in the world had time to do that?
Well, I believe we need a parks department. I see it every day in my real life. I mean, in true life, I run every day down the Concha River, so I fully believe that we need good parks.
But do you need the maintenance side of it, or do you need the creation of it? Which side do you like best?
Well, I mean so I mean, I see it as partially economic development.
Yes.
I think that I think we have the crown jewel of the whole west area of West Texas that we live in is right down here at the Concha River. I know Gary has mentioned many times in the debates and things that he wants to see this be an attraction, and he's even equated it to like hopefully one day Las Vegas, right? Which I'd love to have that conversation with him tomorrow, but. Like I believe that the parks, I think the parks, you know, need to have some love and attention. I think maintenance, obviously, I think continuing to progress the parks is important. I think a lot of people, most of the time that I've talked to, agree that parks are important. Agree that the fire department, the police department's important. Obviously, infrastructure and roads.
Oh
You
yeah,
never stop hearing that,
you
right?
never hear that.
So I
In
think we
water.
all agree on what the socialist model of the government looks like. It's in those
But
areas.
do you think we need another 20 parks, another 30 parks?
Not necessarily more. Well, I mean, you
That's
can
what
always have a few more parks. I don't think that's. But
something.
yeah, where do you stop? Right, that's the hard
Yeah,
decisions that
that's
are needed to be made.
what I would do. And I like what Gary is saying, because there's different. We get our money either from taxes or from sales. So those are our
Sales
two
tax, yeah.
revenue sources. So when I take a look at what we have now, I mean, one of the biggest parks that to me is going totally unused is Lake Nasworthy. We have all of that land. We have a beach. What could we do out there? If you go to Mary Lee Park, you'll be embarrassed. You just think of what we could do out there. Could we build a small carnival? Could we? And you mentioned the food trucks. I would love to see a lot of food trucks out there, and that make it a destination for kids. We could do that right here downtown in the Concho River. What was it called? Fiesta del Concho.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember all the food trucks? Remember everything? Why that stop? Where did that? That's the kind of recreation. Everyone talks about the river stage. How many events do we have at the river stage? Yet we've got almost, was it $16 million allocated to do something more with the river, more restrooms, more showers.
Yeah.
I like the river stage, but I think to the point you're making with the parks, we would get so much more bang for the citizens. And we need to. I'd love to invest in Lake Nasworthy. I'd like to invest here on the Concho River, and there's other opportunities, but those two come really to mind.
So I guess we're talking about the things that are kind of status quo, I guess you would say. But where would be the cuts? Like where if you really got to say, all right, we're gonna we're not gonna raise any more taxes because obviously inflation's happening. I think it's what 7%, something like that. So we're gonna constantly be raising taxes with inflation just to keep up in general, right? I mean, in theory. So unless you vote for the no, well, I guess yeah, you're always going to have that inflationary calculation in there. But like, I guess my question would be: is where would the cuts come from? What services would be cut if we're going to not raise taxes?
I'd have to take a look at each one of them. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that, because I don't know sufficient data to see where the fat is on that particular subject. What I would propose to you, though, because I would look at it, is, do we need to start over on our budget? One of the things that people have come back and said and asked us, would you be agreeable to a zero-based budget start over? Because what we do now is we have a budget, and we historically will try to say we can't make budget. But should we come back and sit down at a table with the experts and say, how much money do we really need at the skinniest form for now, in order to run this town? Do I need, two assistant managers? I know one's operations, one's administrative. Do I need a legal department? Is that legal department something that is big enough? I mean, we haven't had an attorney now since what was her name? Teresa.
Teresa.
Since Teresa left, and we seem to be doing away with that. And so I would relook at that. Do we really need that department, or would it be better to have a contract with a department that we could outsource?
Yeah, well, I think the legal department of the city is a damaging business or a damaging asset to the citizens.
Well,
of
I
San
don't. I
Angelo.
won't go quite that far, but yeah, no, but do we need to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, same thing with the parks and recreation. We have some, from the maintenance side of the house. One of the things that almost killed me with Verizon was maintaining the capital tools that I had, maintaining the trucks, the lawnmowers, the weed eaters,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
of that stuff. And what we did is we came in with a very lucrative contract, or we could come up with a very lucrative contract for San Angelo from 2 or 3 different units and just pay them.
Yeah,
Think
yeah.
of the savings you would have from employees, and I don't want to fire those employees. How do we reuse them when we need them?
Yeah, or
You know,
just have them hire on the subcontractors hire
yeah,
them.
there's a lot of things we need to take a look
I
at.
believe in privatizing a lot of the functions of the city and like eliminating the actual,
Yeah, and that's
because I mean, the people that run municipal operations and especially any government operation in general, they're not necessarily thinking about the most efficient way to do things. They've got a budget. They're not, you can't do anything with, you just got a top line revenue mark. It's not like, and so it just bought those things.
well. That's
bother
where
me.
every year within my company, we pretty much had a zero base. We came back in and said, okay, gentlemen, this is our budget because of inflation, because we're losing customers, so we would come in with a hard number,
Yeah.
and then I had to find a way to make that number. I didn't go into my boss and say, "Hey, boss, this was my number last year. I now need another, 100 million, 200 million more."
Yeah.
He would come down and say, "Based on our taxes and based on our sales tax, you need to make this number," and we worked downward. It was surprising, to the point you're making, what you needed to cut. Uh, I would cut whole departments, if I needed them,
Yeah.
or I would consolidate up. Let me give you an example. Was when I told you I had a NTN responsibilities for Verizon, California to Florida. Well, each one of them had a call center, so I centralized everything. And when California was waking up, it's the other way. Florida would take the first call, so I was able to take the calls from California at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was 8 o'clock in Florida, so I was able to maximize resources. I probably cut all of them by a third.
Yeah.
I had one large center, but you need to learn how to not only consolidate but maximize the resources of
Efficiency.
efficient. One of the things that I hate the most about the city right now, I have a lot of things I would change, but one of the things that really gets under me is you go see an employee and they're mad. Our employees are not happy, and I don't know where that's coming from. But
Well, I'll donate one of my general managers. He can go make customer service a lot happier.
that's what we're talking about. If you come in with a good customer service, I mean, you go get a permit.
I didn't volunteer Ethan or anything.
I know, but that's what we're talking about. We need to find a way to enable our employees, or the Chick-fil-A model, enable them to be able to make our customers happy by providing the service that they are requiring.
Yeah.
And we're not doing that. There's very few happy employees within the city,
Yeah.
and that's wrong. No matter which way you look at it, that's wrong. I would promise you that within your restaurant, you got happy. When I came in, it was a smile. It was
Yeah.
they treated me the right way. It was a happy employee, and that's what it takes to manage.
Well, if they don't smile around here, we send them down the street to other restaurants. You know what I mean?
But that's not. It's something that has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Employee retention, employee satisfaction are very big. That's what makes our city roll.
Yeah. Well, let's talk on the other side, the revenue side, the taxes, right? So when you pay your property, so the city gets a variety of different forms of taxes. Of course, property taxes. When you pay your property tax, a portion of it goes to the county. and then a portion goes to the city and a portion goes to the school district. Dominantly the school district, though. They get
Right.
like what, 72 cents or 72 whatever it is, and then the city gets what, like 60. Well, I don't. Do you know the numbers off the top of your head? I can't remember.
Was it 6%? It's not
Well,
really much.
it's a total of about 2% as a net value. So, like, say you own a home and it's valued at 150,000. You're going to approximately pay 1,700 a month. So that's split up into those three entities. But then also the city gets revenue from sales tax, which is a consumption based tax. So, like when you buy a cheeseburger at Angry Cactus, 0.0825% or 0.0825% goes to the city. And then, of course, that gets distributed. Then, you got this big pot of money, right? Where can we increase that, but without having it be a burden to the property tax owners? I'm a big believer, not to cut you off, but I'm a big believer in consumption taxes rather than asset taxes. You shouldn't have to keep paying over and over again on a piece of property that you own. You know what I mean? Like, I get why. Just in theory, right? But I understand why we need to. But where can we change the calculus on taxes as far as, making everybody in San Angelo more comfortable with not feeling like they're getting drug over the coals every time they get their tax bill in the mail?
The revenue that's required by the city depends on the spending model. And because we're spending, one of the things that we are doing is we're still buying bonds through short-term debt. So, we're starting to go down a dangerous road by going through short-term debt. I need 20 million, so we go get a bond.
So, like on this bond, how long do we have to pay it back?
Well, it depends if we want to go 25 or 30. Are you talking about the Coliseum or the school?
Either or.
Yeah, it's 25 to 30 years. And,
okay.
But then that's where. So when let's keep it on the property tax. So.
And we're still paying, obviously, on other bonds currently, right? How
yes,
many bonds
we haven't paid the last school bond off yet.
Okay.
So
is that the only one we're still currently paying? Do you know?
No, well, we still have the short term. We still got a lot of the short, so we're still paying quite a few bonds.
Okay.
And we could go back, and that's where I think we need to start. Let's follow the money, and we need to follow the money from day one. The last budget that was just approved, and we just had that audit, and we got all the raving reviews. When that auditor came in, he gave it to him on a Friday, and by Tuesday we approved it. I don't know how they could do that. How could the city council look at a document that's 100 and 207, I don't know what that big, 272 pages, and then being able to digest all of that data and approve it?
Yeah.
You can't do it. It just takes time. But from the property tax roll, what I was told was that the city said we needed to increase the value of our homes. And so we kind of put that carrot out there, and they took it to a whole new rim. My personal house has gone up something like 100,000 over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
I haven't touched my house.
Yeah.
It's still the same
And that's not the rate of inflation.
No, it's not the rate of inflation. But they came back and the excuse we're saying it's undervalued.
Yeah.
And then, the city will tell you, well, we lowered the tax rate. Well, apparently if our houses are still going up, our property taxes are still going up, they didn't lower it low enough.
Well, let's go down that rabbit hole, because I've always been really curious. So, okay, you get your bill. Obviously, you pay X amount of percentage on the evaluation of your house. So say, just for round numbers, you have a home, it's worth $100,000, right? You're going to pay X amount percent on that. Of course, there's deductions that are at play and all these different things, right? But in general, from all the properties that I have and I've been looking at, it's right around 2% of the value, give or take about 0.5%. So you're paying 2% to the city. You're paying, to the city, the county, and the school district, right? But the rates haven't necessarily changed. What's changing is the value of the home. So if you increase the value, you're going to have to pay more in taxes. Doesn't it feel like a back end stab when the appraisal department is over here messing with the evaluations?
It's a technique that's very ugly, because what they do is they the city can now hide under the fact that I didn't do it. I'm innocent.
Yeah,
They did it. And
yeah.
it's a finger pointing. We had nothing to do with that.
But how do we stop that? Like, how do we? Whose fingers? Who do we have to get in a corner and say? Is it the Tom Green County Appraisal District and get them in a corner and say, quit being so aggressive on these evaluations. Quit, or like,
There's
who's at fault though?
well,
There's a board, right, that puts together
well,
those calculations. Is
yeah,
that at the
it's
state level or the county
it's
level?
at the county level. They get their, the county does the audits. Now, there's something that's very controversial right now, and I really don't have a stand on it. And we've even had I think Drew Darby stepped in on it. Let's say a house, and that's what do they call it? Whenever you sell a house, what's that? I forgot the document that everybody uses to sell a house. It's whenever you're going to go buy a house, you go through the listing. What's that listing called?
Oh, yeah,
blank.
yeah. I know what you're talking about. Where you have to claim that. Yeah, yeah. I know.
So what's happening is I can't believe I forgot that word. But anyway, what ends up happening? Let's say that you sell your house. Well, that listing on I wish I could think
MLS.
MLS.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. You saved me. From the MLS, we could use, every house that is sold in San Angelo is listed. The sales price is put into the MLS.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's very controversial who should have access to the data, yet everybody really has access to it. The county came to us and said, can we use that? The real estate board came back and one said yes, one said no. Final result was they said no.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? We put the burden of proof on the county, because now let's say that I bought a house for $500,000, but it's appraised at $700,000 when there is a document that could really help them. So all the county can go by is they go look at the house and say, okay, I believe based on my best interpretation what this house is worth, when there's really a document that we could utilize. Should we utilize it? I think that's up to the real estate board. But Drew Darby said that, in his opinion, that should be private. Well, I agree with the privacy of it, but on the other hand, I don't agree that they're artificially raising the prices of the house when we potentially could use a tool, and if not the MLS, something else.
Well, my history has been like, if you sell it, so say they value your house at 200,000 and you only bought it for 150, you can bring the sales receipt, and I believe they will change it back down to the price that you purchased it.
They may change yours, but what about your neighbors? What about the area?
True.
And that's what they were looking at. Is we'll pick on Bentwood Country Club. If they looked at what's been sold and they determine, the price per square foot is X, then everybody within that area should fall into that category based on sales.
Yeah.
But they don't. You're right. They'll come in and they'll say, okay, Trinidad, you proved it to us, but my neighbor and everyone else.
Well, see, I'm a guy who I was always taught younger in life that you should protest every single property tax. I protest everything that I own every single year, every single time.
So do I.
And I usually get my way almost 95% of the time because they're pretty good about it. But what I really feel bad, and why I was down at Tom Green County Appraisal District a couple of years back with our pitchforks and our torches, not really, but was, I really feel bad for the people who don't pay attention to their finances like I do. I mean, I pay attention to my bills. I pay attention to my taxes. Even though I don't like to admit it, I actually pay attention. But I can't stand doing that work, but I pay attention. And what I feel is there's a lot of people getting taken advantage by the system because they're not paying attention. But their property taxes are going up. They're not even noticing until the bill is due. Maybe they have it in escrow and they're wondering, oh, what's going on?
But who are they taking advantage of? It's going to be the vulnerable people. It's going to be the senior citizens.
Yeah,
it's going to be the disabled. It's going to be, the people from the Lakeview area. Some of the people out there that aren't as educated as, some of the others are. So it's going to be a whole, probably 80% of the city of San Angelo is being taken advantage of. I believe that 20% of the people rule our city, and about 80% are the ones that are vulnerable.
So, are you familiar with the whole thing that happened in Lubbock where they were trying to do the no new tax rate type of
Yes.
situation? I don't know a lot of the details. I was just listening to a little bit of conversation about it, so I might be a little off. But after talking with Tom, he was kind of saying that that was like a political stunt. It was not ever feasible not to raise the taxes.
Why not?
Is there a way to affirmatively say that we're not going to raise taxes, but here's how we're going to do it? Because in order to do that, we'd have to make those cuts like we were talking about earlier. So, like, what knobs are you turning, and where are you going to turn them, or where are you going to put pressure? Even though you have nothing to do with the county and the appraisal district, because the mayor is separate from that. But where's the pressure fall on whoever's making the decisions for these evaluations going up
Well,
so much?
and maybe we can't control the county.
Is it Lane Carter's fault?
Well, if we could go to Lane and we could use Lane, but let's just focus on what we can control. Like the incident that you're looking at Lubbock when they were taking a look at the city, the ones that said no was the city council and the mayor. So it starts all that's
Wait,
so
say that again.
it's a
Who
city,
said no?
the city council and the mayor
And they said no to what?
to the no taxes up in Lubbock.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so when they came back in, so who makes that decision? And right now, I believe in a fresh start. And the people that are going to give us that fresh start is you've got three brand new city councils, a brand new mayor, and then the three existing are pretty sharp. So we have the opportunity right here, right now, to make that change. If we elect to use the old insanity rule that says doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result, it's not going to happen. This is the time. I mean, for the next 4 years, at least, if we don't make that change now, you're going to live with whatever you have for the next 4 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you can't do that. So the city council can really come back in and say, you know what, this is what we're going to adopt for the city, and we're going to go talk to Lane Carter. We're going to go talk to Drew Darby. We're going to go talk to, Pfluger. We're going to talk to these people and see what they can do for us. But we don't have to follow what anybody else does. We need to be the leaders in order to make this happen. And that's where I believe that fresh start, that fresh outlook is so important. And that's when you take up the leadership, and this is a commercial for, who do you elect? Uh, but you mentioned Tom Thompson. Tom is a marketing guy. If you put Tom and me into a room, he's going to draw all the crowd because he's a marketing. He knows how to do that. That's what marketing and salespeople do. You bring in Gary into the room. Gary is one of the best uh, pair, I won't call them preachers. They're
Pastor.
pastors. That's the word. He's one of the best pastors I know. He's very good at that. But one of the things they don't have is they don't execute. They talk it to death. And, in my world, I'm a very hands-on. I look at numbers. I'm very stoic. That's what I'm used to that. So my world is not I'm not going to be the most flamboyant. I'm not going to be out there doing a lot of those kinds of things that is going to attract the people to come and visit with me. What I'm going to do is I know how to execute a plan, and I know how to look at the vision and create the whole vision of this is what we need to do,
Yeah.
and then work with the city council to implement that plan, because it takes all seven of us to do that. So that's the difference. That do you want a marketing person? Do you want a, Gary, or do you want me? I mean,
Yeah.
so that to me is the major difference between the three of us. We need to execute, and I like to pick on the Animal Control Center. That money was released in March of 2024, and and then it was supposed to be done in November of 2024. Nothing's been done. We talked. Where did the money go? Nobody knows. We've reallocated it for this year. Well, heck, we're already almost into May, and what's been done?
Yeah.
We talk.
That we hear all about that. The louder voices in the room sometimes are the people on that subject.
You've got to quit talking.
Yeah.
Let's get down to the execution mode, and that's what I bring to the table. Just like when they kept giving me all of the different units, I know how to execute. I don't do a lot of talking about stuff. I don't need a.
Well,
a lot
So
of
let's
those.
go back to that whole topic of the taxes, because in theory, if you're not going to raise taxes, then that means technically you can't raise the evaluations of the homes in theory, and that's not possible for the mayor to do at this moment. So
But
how do you accomplish that? Like, how do
the
you accomplish lowering taxes?
the way that you do it at is you bring in the rate to the same number. So we've got to protect the citizens first. So we can lower the rate. So, if
Like
they go
lowering the percentage or lowering the dollar amount they
the
pay?
percentage
The
that
percentage.
we charge.
So the
There's
city's portion, which is the point, I have my tax statement over there. It's 0.64 or something like that,
we
and
drop
then
that
the
to,
school gets 0.72 or something like that. So you're going to drop that.
and they just did. That's what I think Tom will tell you is that they dropped the rate, and but they didn't drop it enough. So that's their claim to fame is that the price of the homes went up, but we dropped the rate, but everybody's numbers are still going up. Now, what do we need to do with that is the real hidden problem behind this is economic development. And where we're getting hit is the fact that we need more money and the way to do that. But right now, the homeowner, is paying 70% of all of the revenue that we get, and the businesses are paying 30%. So when you have that 70-30 split, Lubbock is able, and Abilene, they're able to do a lot more without raising taxes. Why? Because they're the opposite. 30% is paid by the residents and 70% by the businesses. And people will tell you we've done a great job with economic development. I would give us a C at best.
So let's talk about economic development, because it's a passion of mine. Obviously, I'm one of the contributors of, within the restaurant industry, of course, of helping kind of spur the economic development, especially downtown. But more and more, like what I'm trying to get at is what economic development project. I mean, this is a big topic, right? So, and I totally get the concept that economic development takes the burden away from the homeowners, right?
Yes.
Which I fully agree to, and I fully think that that is a smart move to make. And I think that is the answer. The question's always been, how do you make that happen? So, in the case of the Coliseum, for instance, it brings a lot of people. The rodeo brings a lot of people. But you've also come out and not supported the bond specifically for the Coliseum. And in my mind, and of course, maybe I must have been talking to Tom too long about this issue, but in my mind, out of the two bonds, the one that seems to make sense the most is the Coliseum bond. And when it comes to the realm of economic development, even though I do buy in that the school systems have
Yeah, they have a need.
a need for, and the school system is an economic development piece to the puzzle. I mean, you need an educated workforce, and you also need good schools to go to attract people to come to San Angelo. So, I mean, I get that. But, like, why would you, if you think economic is so valuable, why would you not be in agreement with the Coliseum bond?
The thing that I take a look at is we're asking the taxpayers to put in $40 million to do an upgrade to it,
To the
to
Coliseum,
the Coliseum.
the
And
city-owned Coliseum.
the city-owned Coliseum. And then we're going to take the Coliseum and we're going to lease it to the Rodeo Association. We're just going to say, here it is now leased. So then I come back and I ask the questions which I can't get answers to. Okay, you're going to lease it to them for how much? Is it going to at least pay for something? What are we going to gain out of it? And one of the things they'll tell you is, well, we're not going to do the maintenance on it. Well, I'm not asking that. I'm asking, how much money are we going to get for leasing it? Are you going to charge them taxes? They are now an entrepreneur. Do they pay taxes or not? At the Lake Nasworthy, they made them pay taxes, but it's my understanding that the Rodeo Association is not going to have to pay the taxes. So more burden on us. I've asked them, is there a performance clause? Are you guaranteeing me that you're going to have 50 events a year or 10 events a year that's going to generate all that revenue to us?
Yeah.
And they
Well,
won't.
see, and
Why not?
I guess I can kind of come from the other side, because I mean, I think I've made my mind up on that particular bond. But what my argument is in that particular case is, so I was on Civic Events Advisory Board for like 6 years, probably
Okay.
longer than I ever needed to be. So all the venues in the city, I'm very familiar with what shape they're in physically, kind of what the needs are, and that. And when you add double the seating capacity, when you create a bigger venue, when you make it more competitive, because I mean, that thing's like 60, 70 years old or
Yeah,
whatever it
it's
is.
old.
And it's really not a competitive arena in any way, shape, or form. I mean, there's so many bands and things that struggle to even get in there because of the ramps. And I mean, just there's, I mean, I've heard every issue, and there's probably 100 more that have happened since I've left that particular board. But um, you still feel that because it's only 41 million versus the what 400 million
400
that the
million.
city. So it's like a 1/10 of the or 1% of the other bond. You don't see that as getting your money back with economic development, with revenue from people coming because you're going to draw a bigger crowd. Like one of the biggest complaints is people can never get tickets to the rodeo because it's all the. I mean, I haven't paid for a rodeo ticket in ever. I don't think because all of the sponsors get rodeo tickets. So it's like, and you know they're handing them out to everyone who's your business relationships are, but the general public of San Angelo can't come to a rodeo performance because there's no tickets available to buy.
The way you get a rodeo ticket is if you're a season ticket holder,
Yeah,
and let's say that you're a season ticket holder, and then you go to all your friends and say, I want them, I want them, I want them. So you're allowed to buy 100 tickets, 200 tickets. How many do you want? And we'll sell them to you in November.
yeah.
And so by the time all the season ticket holders, and that's why you'll see Spotted
Well, and sponsors too, because a lot of
and
it's in
sponsors,
kind and stuff.
so they're buying. So by the time it's done, it's over. I mean, there is nothing left for the people to buy. Now they're claiming that they get 80,000 people requesting tickets. Those are clicks. So let's say I want a ticket. You said, and I go into the system and I ask for 4 tickets 30 times. That's 30 clicks. That's 30 requests that I put in. No, it was one request, but it counts as 30. So
Yeah.
every time someone tries to get into the system, they're going in and out. It counts as a request for a new. So is 80,000 the right? No, it's not the right number. It's something the system does. It just counts clicks.
Yeah.
And so are the numbers accurate now? Can we get double the people in our hotels, motels, and restaurants in San Angelo? They're already full.
Yeah.
So
Well, I guess that's a hot tax issue, I guess, right?
yeah, I mean, so where are you going to house them, and where are you going to put all these people? So
Well, I guess the argument is that they're local, but that's why I don't think hotel occupancy tax or hot tax is at play
but
in
that's all
that.
we get. I've been told we're not going to get any of the sales tax money. All we get is the sales, and Tom might have told you.
So what other? I guess okay, we're on the topic of economic development, but besides, like the rodeo seems to be, at least from my perspective. Now, to be honest, we don't actually get it. We were talking about this earlier before we started shooting, but we don't get a lot of rodeo crowd. But I definitely feel that the rodeo is one of the number one economic driving forces for event wise, at least stock show and rodeo that San Angelo has. What else competes with that? Like what else brings that much revenue?
Something
And why if we don't if for voting for this bond, it's a fraction of what the school bond costs, right? But why wouldn't that bring more sales tax revenue and kind of start the flow of money coming? Because we're talking about economic development as a topic in general. Doesn't that seem like that bond would actually help the snowball go down the hill faster for creating economic development?
It would for what, a month? So it would. I mean,
For 1 month out of the year when it's
one
happening?
month out of the year while it's happening. And I
Okay.
drove by there this morning and it's back to normal. But
Yeah.
what would? Sports.
Yeah.
Do you know that sports will bring in more revenue than
Oh, I can tell you with 100% certainty, my number one revenue area when I know something's going on is that baseball field down the street. When that happens, you can see everyone in this place. They all have softball and baseball uniforms on. So I understand the whole economic impact.
So if we started investing heavily into eliminate some of the regs we have out there, people are saying, well, we don't want turf out there. We want that, go out there, put in turf, grow it. Sports would be,
Well, I think
12 months.
Yeah, I think the DMO, the Destination Marketing Organization, or also called the CVB, Convention and Visitors Bureau, part of the chamber. Well, and you know that. I guess everyone listening so they can follow along. they're pretty aggressive in getting these. I mean, we're starting to pay these promoters to come in and hold these baseball tournaments and so on and so forth. So there's an aggressive approach to get the economic development stirred. I
But
guess what I'm going back to is, why wouldn't that be part of the equation for the Coliseum?
you know,
I guess I'm just challenging you on the
well,
non-support for the Coliseum.
the number one reason that I don't is I'm talking door to door knocking and talking to a lot of people. They can't afford it. It comes down to an affordability. And I go to these folks and they're saying, Trinidad, I'm losing my home. I cannot afford
But
any more.
can they afford the school bond?
No,
Are you supporting the school bond?
I am supporting the school
But
bond.
that's literally 100 times bigger than the other, because one's 41 million and the other's 400 and something million.
The only
So
reason
why would you, if they can't afford it, what makes you think they can afford the school bond? I'm just trying to challenge you on this whole subject because I'm curious. I'm for the Coliseum and not for the school bond, and I can tell you why. But
we'll count. But I think when I take a look at the education process, and we talked about those that are not able to do what they need to do with the school bond. So you take a look at some of the areas that will never be able to get into private schools. You redid this building, so you know all of the issues you dealt with in working with an old building. You spent probably a lot more money than you suspected, and that's what's happening to the schools right now. So I guess my soft heart is education. I'm a product of education. I graduated from Lakeview. I went through Lincoln, Lakeview, and I needed that.
yeah.
What I'm upset too with the rodeo is the fact is their timing. Did you know it was coming, or did it just hit you all at once at a city council meeting? They come in and say we're gonna do this. Where was the transparency? Why didn't they tell us 2 to 3 months ago we're gonna bring it up?
I think the city, wouldn't it have been civic events that would have brought that up?
Somebody should have.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
But why did the city council vote on it immediately?
but it's not the rodeo's bond; it's the city's bond for the Coliseum, right? The Rodeo Association is a separate entity from the Coliseum,
Yes.
even though they're the biggest user of the facility.
Yeah.
Isn't there a disconnect there, or am I confused?
I think it's the reason we have this bond is because we now have a potential lease. And I think that's so one is driving the other.
Oh, a potential lease? You meaning as part of the bond, they're going to become...
potentially give it to the Rodeo Association.
Okay.
And
I haven't heard any of that.
Yeah.
Banter.
So that's what they're coming back and they're saying. But I think the timing is wrong. I think we should have waited another year. If the school bond passes, and I don't know if it will or not. That's kind of what we said earlier. That's going to happen before we even get into office.
Yeah.
But I feel that if we would have given the taxpayers maybe a year, let them settle down. But to come in and give the taxpayers 2 hits on the same day, I think there's going to be a revolt. It may pass, and if it passes, okay. But I think the timing was wrong, and I think the transparency was wrong. You heard the rodeo? No, you didn't go to the rodeo. The rodeo announcer kept saying it was $4. I think some people were telling me he said a year and it's $4.
Yeah, well, I like the fact that there's more bathrooms. I like that. Yeah,
too.
I was at the rodeo this year a couple times, and I saw they're running the ad or whatever for the bond.
And so is that right? Run the ad.
Well,
5,000 people.
Tom gives me it's
time.
like $8 a year for the school bond, and it's significantly less for the Coliseum. I think it's like $4. Yeah, I think $4, and I think it's $8. I don't know how $4 and $8 because it's 40 million at 41 million and 400 million, but I don't know how that math works.
Well,
I never believed those numbers anyway. Honestly.
So why did we provide a commercial to everybody attending the rodeo?
Well, I mean, there's obviously some interest at play with the rodeo. I mean, there are some positive aspects to that connection, I think. And I guess this goes back to the whole economic development that I think we can talk about these two bonds even a little bit further. But that's why I'm in support of the Coliseum bond, because I see the Coliseum bond as being a true economic starter at economic development issue. And I do believe the school is that same thing, but I had this conversation with Tom yesterday, and I'll kind of go from down here to a 30,000 foot view. But why I feel uncomfortable with giving the school bond approval on my vote is that I believe the system is flawed from the structure side. I don't believe, well, I mean, of course, there's socialist components to our government, right? And I don't think that, a lot of people are no socialism, blah, 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 right? And that's a lot of times pertaining to a national political argument. But what I really break down is like, all right, I understand that socialist model is okay for when it comes to infrastructure. I mean, we all pay our taxes into here. We expect the streets to be okay. The public safety, the fire department, the police department, we pay our taxes. We know that when a fire happens, the police department or the fire department's going to come, help us, right? And I don't think anyone complains about that. And, I think our citizens are in general happy about that. But the model of the school system is such, and this all came about not anything to do with the mayoral race, but when Drew Darby and Greg Abbott had a differing opinion on school choice, I really started thinking to myself, and the Darby camp, are good friends of mine, and of course, I appreciate everything that Greg Abbott does, in his quest for making Texas better. Most of what he does, I agree. Actually, some things I completely disagree with, but that's not for local politics at all. But larger picture, I believe the flaw in the school system is there's no true incentive to become more efficient and give students better education. And when I say that, and I know Tom's wife is a teacher, and I got plenty of teachers that come in here, but not the teacher's fault. We all agree that the teachers are underpaid. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yes.
With 100% certainty, they're underpaid. But I feel that when you have these superintendents and they're these academic minds, and they're not in the real world business world, the academic theory doesn't translate to a P&L. They're not. It's not like you're going to increase your revenue in the school system unless you're going to increase your taxes. So what's the opposite side of that coin? It's becoming more efficient. And when school choice came about and San Angelo ISD was against school choice, and I know the word school choice is a loaded term, so I'm not going to go into the concept of school choice right now. But I understand how it can be bad for rural areas because there's not a lot of competition. But in a big city like Dallas, school choice obviously makes sense because it makes the schools better, and the incentives become, how can you get better grades? How can you educate your students better? And there's an incentive. Out here in rural West Texas, where we only have 2 high schools in San Angelo ISD, but we got a couple private schools, allow the money for the private school that you're paying in your taxes, that's 7.1%, allow that to go with your student so your voice is heard, and it's almost like a vote every time you pay your tax bill. And so, but that system's not at play. So by giving $440 million to the school system, to me seems like just a waste of money because nothing's going to change until the structure of the school system changes. Where am I wrong? And this is probably a conversation for the superintendent or someone like that, because I've talked to other superintendents here locally, like Erie County Superintendent, a couple other people, and they all have valid points, but I still haven't heard it through my own ears on how do you change the system, or where am I wrong in that whole idea?
There's really, what you got to do, what I did to motivate my employees and motivate everything else was I cut their salary and I gave them a bonus plan. So the more you deliver, and it's, I don't know if you do that with your staff.
We absolutely, with management, have incentives, food costs, labor costs, you get your bonus, you get a base salary. Absolutely. Performance based.
That's the way that you affect the teachers.
But that's not the tax system. They don't get more or less taxes with their performance.
No, they don't, but in order for them to get a paycheck, they've got to perform. Did you look at the grades today that came out?
Yeah, I actually saw that. It's pretty sad.
Fort Concho and
Santa Rita Elementary
got an A.
Those are the only 2 in the whole city.
Good money. They're more incentivized.
Yeah.
They're more incentivized to do the right thing.
But why are they incentivized? Is it the parents?
It's the parents. It's the parents' involvement. They get more of the what I would call the premier teachers, not curriculum, but equipment and everything else. And I mean, you can't get into either one of those schools. People that I know have tried to come in and say, I want my child to go to those schools. It's by invitation only kind of
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
now these days. But, you know, getting back to the schools, uh, I know firsthand, and we talked about it, you've experienced it. When you have buildings that old, how long do you think? So let's say that there's a legislative in place now that it may be 5 years before the next bond comes into place, and we'll see. And then inflation will take care of that. But how much longer can these buildings survive?
yeah.
That's the argument.
Well, we have a lot of infrastructure and building issues. I think we can all agree on that.
And there's not enough money to maintain them. I don't
Yeah,
care what we do at that point. But that's why I separate the two. I'm saying, okay, if I've got an old car and I've got a fantastic driver, or I have a brand new car and a bad driver, they're separate issues. I need to fix the bad driver or the old car. And in my world that I look at is I'm saying, because I've got a couple of buildings I wished I would have got a bulldozer in, and what I did was I tried to retrofit them. You just can't do it.
yeah.
It just doesn't work. But that's the argument that I'm using in my head is these buildings cannot last much longer, and it's our children that are suffering. I'm mad as hell at not at the teachers, but the curriculum and the process we're doing it. But I do know that I'm separating them in my mind and saying it's buildings versus Austin with their education and everything else. And I but that's to answer your question. That's where the separation is for me. If you have an old car, are you going to continue? How long will you continue to maintain it?
So is that 440 million or whatever it is going mostly to buildings, or
Yes.
what is it going to?
Just buildings.
Just buildings.
Well, it's going to buildings, soccer fields,
Yeah,
and mariachi, things, and
Yeah.
but it is going to infrastructure.
infrastructure.
It does not one penny of it goes to teachers, and that's the rub that a lot of people have. But from an economic development, would you go to a town if you had children that had bad schools?
Yeah, yeah. No,
And
I fully get the economic development argument of it.
And when you mention, but that's why I'm in favor. I don't think our buildings can take much more.
Yeah,
And I've seen, like I said, I own several of the buildings that I'm on the verge of just saying enough, because year over year over year, if I had started 10 years ago with a new building,
yeah,
I would have spent less.
yeah. Well, and I guess my rub is a taxpayer. I'm good at the moment. Are you good?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. My big rub as a taxpayer really is the school gets the majority of my property taxes,
Yes.
but yet they're the ones that need the bonds the most.
I-
So that might be
I
the
told- I
symptom
totally-
of a bigger problem, which in my opinion is the structure of the schools. But I mean, I'm not going to beat that
But-
horse to death.
but we got to go after that, and the way that you do that is right now we've got 3 candidates going for the school board.
Yeah, something
Choose
like that.
the right ones.
Yeah.
You've got to get people in there that just like you're doing with the mayor now. Do you stay with the old and hope he changes, or do you come in with fresh ideas, vision, and really start looking at it again? That's a choice you've got to make.
Yeah,
Do you want to continue the way you're going and hope things get better? Or do you really come in and say, guys, there's quite a few changes that need to take place. And now is a time of, you mentioned several times the Economic Development Board and the Chamber of Commerce. How many years has it, Roland Peña left us, and then who was the next gentleman that left us?
for what? For
the Economic Development Board.
for economic, Guy Andrews.
Guy
was
Andrews
gone,
left us,
and then you had I don't know who was before that.
Well, then we've had some interims.
Yeah.
Why can't we? It seems that every time we put someone in there that has fresh ideas, they don't stay.
Yeah.
How many presidents have we gone through from the Chamber of Commerce now?
Well, you don't want to get. Well, the chamber is a whole nother story, but you don't want to get me down the rabbit hole of COSA DC because I have a sore spot in my heart. I
I'm
think
telling
I
you.
honestly think it's one of the most corrupt. And I'm not saying the people on the board, but behind the scenes with
Yes.
city managements and the staff side of things, I think that's the absolute most corrupt board. And the 2 mics are good. I'm just picking and choosing my sides here, but I think it's I still am under the we went down that rabbit hole, so I'll take it for a second, and then we'll change topics. But Costa DC still owes me $20,000, and I will never open a business in San Angelo, Texas again until I get that money. That's why I chose to open an Angry Cactus in Abilene rather than opening the giant food truck here. Is because I really feel it's a corrupt board, and I think, anyways, I don't want to. I'm not running for mayor, so I.
But that's why that's why that topic is. It's time to change, and it's being controlled by the wrong people. The fact that we can't even keep a director in there tells you that the director's trying to do the right thing, and we say no, get out of here.
What do you think the actual issue is? Is it because certain people that may be elected and certain high-level staff are trying to manipulate what the board does and how they control the money? Or what do you think the actual root of the problem is? Because I think that's the case.
I think it's overreaching.
Yeah.
And, we talk about the government overreaching.
Yeah.
The mayor and the council are only supposed to talk to the city manager, and yet you see a lot of them going and talking to the economic. Well, who else would talk to them? Yeah. So is it Daniel Valenzuela that's making all that, the money that is he the one that's telling them? And he can't really reach out and touch them either. They're supposed to be an independent board.
Yeah.
Make their own decisions, yet we keep pushing them. But to me, that's a whole different area that whole area needs to be relooked at. What do we give
Well, you've talked about restructuring Costa DC, right? So, like, what is your vision on that? How do you see the board functioning, how it is today versus what you think the model should be?
I think that the first thing I would ensure is that we have a definite separation from the city, that they are truly isolated and protected, just like our chief of police is.
So for people who don't understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so Costa DC is funded through sales tax.
Yes.
Correct? And is it fully funded through sales tax?
Yes.
Okay. So they get whatever chunk, however they calculate that, they get X amount of dollars for development of business and infrastructure,
off that
and things
2%.
of that for businesses.
Yes.
So how do you still get the money from sales tax, and what do you do with that money? That should be an independent board that makes those decisions.
Yes, that should be.
Should the mayor have any involvement in that? Should city staff have any involvement in that?
That's illegal to do that.
So when they stop meetings, like when Michael Dane stops a meeting and they go into the executive board in Costa DC, like you're saying that they shouldn't have the city staff shouldn't have authority over that?
The reason he can do that, he's the acting director.
Currently of Costa DC? And so you're saying it should be independently appointed people, or
it should be. Well, we hired.
Where's the model change? I guess like
the model change is
just you replace everybody.
No, the model change is you bring in, like we hired Roland and we hired Guy Andrews. So we hired 2 people to do the job, and then we got rid of them because we didn't like what they were doing.
Yeah, yeah.
So once you hire someone, you're not, unless it's something that's gregarious out there that you're really they're doing wrong, let them do their job.
So would that be akin? So the director of Costa DC, would that be akin to, like, say, the CEO of the chamber? Would they be basically the same position? And what you're saying is that the city staff and the mayor or city council, whoever, but
they're overreaching in that area.
They're going and they're getting into the pockets and the decisions of the executive director
of the coast. Yes, and that needs to stop.
Yeah.
And then when you start looking at the chamber, I loved Walt to death. I thought Walt was probably one of the best, and yet, his statement comes back and he said overreaching. I mean, if you read the statement that he put on there, he really comes back and he said there's a lot of serious issues going on to the same thing that you're doing, the overreaching, the manipulation, and then it just goes on and on.
And do you mind saying who you're saying in the government is overreaching? Like, specifically? Do you want to say
it has to be the city council or the mayor.
Oh, okay. I'm just saying.
It has to be them.
Yeah. No, I
mean, there's nobody else.
I have my opinions, but I'm not wearing that shirt today,
I don't think, who takes the blame? Daniel Valenzuela takes the blame for everything.
He seems to be Teflon these days, doesn't he?
Yeah, I don't know how he survives. Daniel is a very, very smart man. Let him do his job.
Okay.
You need to let him. I mean, it's like, you if you had all of us telling you, or you're fired tomorrow.
Yeah.
how long would you last? You'd probably be gone tomorrow. You know, you could take. It's not right. We need to try. If we got a person in power,
Yeah.
let them do their job. You know, uh, but it's out there. That's why I think that whole department. You know, we give 1.6 million to bring in new businesses to San Angelo. It's like a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, yeah.
And we've got two people, the two mics,
and we expect to compete with Midland and Odessa and
you know,
Abilene
and you look at the two mics that are over there. Have you been to their office?
oh well, no, it's a little hole in the wall office is what I've heard, right? Just a tiny little. They don't even have an office. It's one office or something.
It's
that they
one.
share?
It's one office that they share.
Yeah.
So you're looking at corporate headquarters coming in.
Yeah, yeah.
Big officials, and that's where they go, or to the conference room next door.
That brings me up to my next topic, because you've talked a lot on this campaign trail that you're on about the full-time mayor and having an office at City Hall.
Yes.
Right. And so I've heard a couple of your, I guess, competitors or whatever you want to say, kind of talking why they don't think that's a good idea. But my ears perked up a lot, because I feel like our current mayor is a full-time mayor, but just in the wrong way. You know, as we were kind of discussing just a few minutes ago, right? But like, what would so are you saying right now that our mayor's not a full-time mayor? Or are you just saying what's an office bring to the table?
I talked to Brenda and asked her how many hours she was putting in before I put my name in as candidate, because I wanted to know what I was getting into. Then I talked to Alvin Yu, and then I talked to, you know, all of the mayors. So I went out and said, you know, I'm running for mayor. Talk to me. Tell me what a full-time mayor is, and tell me what the expectations are. They're all putting in about 35, 40 hours. So if you have a full-time job like you do, can you pull out 40 hours of your daily life to go be a full-time mayor? Now, the other thing is that, you know, being a mayor, if you wanted to talk to the mayor, how do you get to it? You call on her cell phone, and she may or may not pick up.
Facebook, I've tried a few times.
Well, city council, how do you talk to her? Why don't we have a place that, you know, what I'm envisioning is maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays, or Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I come in from 10 to 2 every day of those days, and then we find someone that will take my calls. If somebody calls, they schedule meetings, and no, it's not to go talk to the city manager it's to talk to the people. And I'm tired of coffee shops. I have bought more Dad Burn coffee this thing than I ever have in my whole life, because that's the only place we can meet.
Yeah.
We don't have a home for one of the most important jobs the city has. Why not? Why don't we have a home?
So could there be any quorum issues if you get too many people in the same
Of course
room?
they could.
Could there be any like?
Of course they could. But why are you going to vote for me if you think I'm a crook?
You know, I mean, that's a fair statement.
I mean, and that was my response. If you think that all these people are
so in the history of San Angelo, we've never had a mayor's office.
No.
Is there a reason for that, or is it just something that was overlooked? I mean, politically, it seems like a smart move.
I talked to the city council folks and said, how many hours do they put a week aside from, you know, the city council meetings and maybe some special meetings? It's about 4 hours.
So if you're to do the bare minimum of the mayor's job, is it literally the bare minimum would be just show up to city council meeting and show up to all the workshops?
Yes.
That's it. And then whatever boards that you're on and so on and so forth.
Do
and ribbon cuttings and then the showman stuff. But you know, theoretically, that's not.
Like Tom says, he was the what is it called? Mayor pro tem.
Yeah, mayor pro tem.
That's a big bragging fact for him. You know what a mayor pro tem does?
They just get all the same information the mayor does, right? I don't know. You tell me.
One day, if the mayor, like Brenda missed one meeting. Well, right now Lucy Gonzalez is the mayor pro tem. Tom had the one prior to that. It's a 2-year thing. So in both of them, Brenda had to go to Washington. So the mayor pro tem
conducts the meetings.
And if there's a ribbon cutting or some other event, they attend, and then it's done.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's it. So when we talk about, I'm the mayor pro tem, I can take over this. Come on, give me a break. You ran a one meeting. That doesn't give you any expertise. So then I said, okay, what kind of orientation do you get? Do they train you? Do they show you how to run a P&L? Do they show you how to read a budget? Do they show? No. They bring in Daniel Valenzuela will bring in his staff, and they come and introduce themselves. More of a meet and greet. That's the training that they're getting. So, why is someone that's on the city council any better? They're not.
Yeah, yeah,
There's really no, So being a pro tem is okay. I conducted one meeting
yeah.
and one meeting only. Does that prepare you?
Fair enough.
No, it does. I mean, so it sounds very impressive. I'm the mayor pro tem, and you stand up tall and you say it over and over and over. Okay, so you conducted one meeting, and normally that meeting is short because the mayor doesn't want to give the right
Yeah,
to do this. So it's you got to read between the lines a lot of times. When they say stuff, and I know it's an election year, and I know that we've got to embellish, I guess, sometimes more, but I don't do that.
yeah.
You talked about
Politics can be cruel.
the good old board network. I mean,
We'll save that for toward the end.
All right.
Because that's like the big cherry juicy.
I like that one. Bring it on.
Still on sales tax though. Okay, so going to tiers. So part of sales tax also goes to tiers, which is the tax reinvestment zone. I guess you would say. I don't know what the actual. But basically, what it is, we're split into two, north and south, and part of the revenue from the businesses coming through sales tax, in particular, goes into this fund, and it's distributed for facade grants and for whatever qualifies for tiers. So a couple months back, there was a controversy about nonprofits getting money.
The church.
Church, but I know a few other nonprofits that were also interested in, using that money. So what are your thoughts on having nonprofits use tiers money? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Or
I think it's a good thing. I really
the nonprofits?
Yes.
Okay.
But why?
Why?
Because it's the law. When they wrote up the tiers process, they put it into law that they could utilize it.
Could. Not shall, but could.
Well,
May versus shall.
Well, I think
I learned that a long time ago when I was having a dispute with the city. May versus shall is a very important legal distinction.
I think it says that it's allowed.
Allowed. So it may be able to happen.
So it is allowed. And then in particular in the church function, they applied, it was approved. They took it to the tiers committee, it was approved. So they followed every process.
Yeah.
And it passed all of the mustard. It's allowed. And then the city council comes back and says, no, we don't agree with anybody we put on the committees. We don't agree with the law. We don't agree. It's their job.
So you and Tom differ in that approach.
Yes.
Because he thinks, and I'm not really sure where I fall. I'm leaning toward Tom's side, but I'll tell you why. So Tom's opinion is that only the people that put in the money for tiers should get the money back in tiers. So the businesses, because there's no sales tax generated from nonprofits. So your churches aren't contributing to sales tax. So why would they get the money put into that pot? And he doesn't think they should, which I can see why I believe that's the same, that should be true because.
So why put it into law? If you don't agree with it,
are you saying? But
it's allowed.
Yeah, you said it's allowed. It's not required. That's what the board is for, to make that discretion.
Well, right now, if you put in for it, it's allowed. So are we saying that the speed limit is not 55? We can break that law. We can make it 80, 90. If it's allowed, what right do we have to challenge what's in writing? If we don't like it and we don't want them to do it, then change the process, change the law.
What happened? What was the ultimate result of that? Did the churches get the tiers money or did they not? And was that in the North Zone?
Yes.
Okay. And they didn't get the money.
No, the city council and Tom was one of the real vocal ones, and he said, I don't for the reasons you stated, he says, I don't think they should get it. Well, why not? Especially that church, pick on that church because they had every right intention. They give away money. I mean, they give away food. They give away clothing. They do. So they bring in literally, I don't know how many citizens, say hundreds of citizens that do pay taxes, that do buy, and all of that stuff they're giving, guess what? Somebody paid taxes on it. But, I can see if it's something that they're doing because they want to beautify. But in this case, everything that they were doing, there was product being purchased to give away. So what do you mean there's no sales tax? Of course there is.
Well, for the businesses in the zone, not for where they're buying it from.
Well, but they're creating the opportunity for them to go. Let's say that they bought 100 jackets. They're the ones that caused the process to go out and buy. Someone else got it, but they're the ones that made it happen.
But I think what they're saying is that the tax reinvestment zone, only the sales tax from the businesses in the zone get put into this fund. When, say, for instance, the north side, Walmart, Franco's, Western Sky, what other businesses are up there? There's a very few limited. That's why they have such a hard time giving away the money in the north zone, because not very many people qualify. In my mind, it would be redraw the lines, but I mean, that's obviously takes another act.
You know, that we've gone, I haven't done it, but people have gone door to door. We got tiers money, and they tell them to go away. The businesses, for two reasons.
Yeah.
Reason number one, they say, as soon as I paint my building, as soon as I, guess what? Where's my taxes going?
Green County Appraisal District comes in and says you're worth $1 million now.
That's right. And so, and then the other one is, how many? Let's say it's up to 100,000. So how can you write a check for a business that's trying to make? Can they write a check for 100,000? So they have to go to a bank, borrow the money, pay all the contractors, and eventually, some guy was telling me he's waited over 9 months to get reimbursed for this tiers money. So it's not like, you know, it's being given to them. You go do all the work, you go do everything else, and we will, when we agree to it, we will pay you.
Yeah.
How many of those small businesses have that kind of money to write a check on and let it set for a year?
Well, I think it definitely helps. Like, I've taken advantage of tiers every chance I get, and I think it's a good program. I mean, it's what helped us do part of this project. Well, I can't afford it. I know that there's always going to be a negative on the backside. You know, I mean, it makes, everyone says it takes money to make money, but really what happens is you're just hoping that, you know, that your investment pays off.
I'm just hoping they don't, because I'm taking this stance, I'm hoping they don't, because I just bought a building downtown. And I plan to use tiers money to make it, you know, better. I want to use it for I don't even know what I'm going to use it for, but it's a good little building, and we'll modernize it. We'll use it. But I'll tell you, it's the building across from the pizza place, the Masonic Lodge. The old
yeah. You bought that?
I'm in the process.
Oh, nice. I love that building.
So I'd like to fix it up and let the community use it for something. I don't know what it's going to be.
I know you'll probably hate this idea, but I always thought that building would look amazing in hot pink. But now that's not historical, and that would never fly.
But see, I'm not against tiers money. I think but I can afford it.
Yeah.
I can write a check tomorrow for that amount, and I can wait a year because I know the payoff, just like you said, I know the payoff is good. But the people that I talk to in the North Zone can't afford it. Yeah. Now, you mentioned two individuals. Franco's didn't have any problem using it. Who owns Franco's?
We don't want to talk about that.
That's okay. Who owns the other one? Yeah. I mean, so, you know, when you take it away from and you do that.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, so that's why, and I guess my bottom line on that is, if it's the law, abide by the law. Yeah. Don't wait till the city council meeting to say no.
Okay, fair enough.
And if you don't like those people that said yes, fire them and start
over. Is that a state law? Is that
no? It's a
city law. Tiers is all city.
Well, tiers money comes from the state, but we have our own group. So
I guess who makes the law, the regulations around tiers?
The city made the decision to allow the North to allow it.
So we could theoretically change the way that tiers is structured in theory.
Yes. In theory.
So do you see any improvements in the way that tiers is done, other than allowing nonprofits to get that money?
What I would do for the North area is that I would come back in, and let's say that I painted the building, and the contractor comes in, gives me my bill, and it's for $50,000 or $35,000, whatever the number is. I then take that bill, and as a business, I don't pay it. I take it to the tiers board and tell them, send your inspectors now.
Yeah.
They come in, they inspect the building, it approves, meets their qualification. The tiers board now pays that bill.
Yeah.
Why put the burden back on these people that cannot afford it?
Okay.
So that would be a major change for me.
Yeah.
Let them be able to use it, and then maybe give them a discount. I don't know how this is, but can we impose or do something that for 2 years we can't raise their taxes? We freeze them somehow. I don't know the
Yeah,
process,
for
but
the yeah. I mean, I always fear that too. You put more money into a building, they're going to start charging you
oh,
more.
I
And you
know
know,
what they're
like
going to do to me in
yeah,
that
it's
building
crazy.
downtown.
It's almost not an incentive to invest in your business, you know, or in your
Right,
building.
and
So
that's
it
what they're
seems
telling
that,
me.
yeah.
But yeah,
Okay. Another question I really had actually, I was just thinking about this just a second ago, is going back to the whole property tax thing. You know, Tom brought this up yesterday, and I think it's a fully valid point. You know, five of the top employers in San Angelo are nonprofits. You've got Shannon, Goodfellow, ASU,
school district
School
and
District,
Ethicon.
and Ethicon. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so five giant businesses. Not a single one of those entities pays property tax. Now, of course, it wouldn't make sense for the school to pay their own property taxes because that money's going directly back to them, right? But like Ethicon, Shannon, you know, they're not contributing in any way, shape, or form, and they are able to have a monopoly in our city. So that pisses me off, by the way.
Oh,
But
but
we
me
won't
too.
go down that rabbit
Me
hole.
too. Well, we're in the same
But
rabbit
like,
hole.
if we're going to talk about, maybe we don't talk about cutting departments with a chainsaw. Maybe we talk about taxing some of these nonprofits. Is that even possible for the mayors? I mean, that's
No,
probably state and federal law.
that
But
would be stated. But what could we do? San Angelo used to have a program called Pilot, Payment in Lieu of Taxes, and
okay,
that was several mayors back. I think it was when Mayor Lone was our mayor. So we had that. Shannon would provide, and other people would come back in, and they would provide us money. Let's say they come in and say, "Here's 20 million. I know I'm not paying my taxes. I know that's substantially less." So they would donate 20 million to something the city council and the mayor and everyone agreed that maybe it's for a new police department, maybe it's for something that we need desperately, but there, and then all of a sudden it just got cut and we don't know why. What stopped? That was a good program in my mind, but I can't get any kind of definitive answers as to why did it stop. So there are ways. San Angelo used to take advantage of
well, I
that.
don't hear any mayoral candidates except for this conversation right now talk about that. Like, I mean, I've heard Tom talked about it a little bit, but I don't think anyone wants to ruffle the beast of Shannon. I don't think anyone wants to ruffle the beast of Ethicon.
Yeah, so ruffle the citizens.
Yeah, that's the problem, right?
Yeah,
We're
that's the
ruffling.
problem.
Yeah.
So I mean, what Shannon? I, to me, Shannon is on the borderline of something great. They've bought all these buildings, and when you take a look at
But you
what
can't sit
Shannon,
here and tell me they're nonprofit with a
no,
straight
they are
face.
very, very much profit.
I mean, yes, that's their category.
But they've grown it, and they're poised for greatness. You take Angelo State University; they're part of Texas Tech, who has a medical team. So when you start looking at those two, and you take Goodfellow Air Force Base that has the ability to bring in doctors, could we not find a coalition amongst those? I've talked to a couple of them and said they would talk about it. No commitments, but just think about what those three could do for us, and then maybe in this pilot or something else. Now, we don't want to do anything until we have the meetings. We don't want any unintended consequences. We don't. But talk about an opportunity to bring three of the five that you mentioned, and Ethicon. I mean, they're in the
and they
medical
just
arena.
got their tax exempt status, correct? They've
Correct.
always paid taxes,
Yeah,
so we just got it.
I think they were in the process of leaving or something, and we but nevertheless, we have an opportunity to, as a team, to bring everybody to the table and say, help us. And I believe that they would. I really do believe that if you work with them with, something like Pilot or something else that exists out there in the world, that it would be a tremendous opportunity for us to bring revenue and charge those entities. But there are ways to do it. That's why you've got to create this vision as to how do you bring people together.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Any visionary ideas you see for the city? Like anything that you think, oh, this is my push, economic development wise, at least. Like, I mean, I know, like I was saying, I know I've heard Gary talk a lot about the river and making this thing even bigger and better, and so on and so forth. But
that would be an immediate fix. So Gary's approach is now. because there's no reason the city couldn't come back out, or the new mayor on May 5th could come back in and say, you know what, this is going to be our focus. So, we're going to work on Lake Nasworthy. We're going to work on the Concho River. So we could do that. That would be an immediate fix. Long-term fix, I talked to Texas Pacifico. They believe that the railway will be in this year. So they're going to finally finish that. They've been saying that for several years, but he felt pretty confident that he was going to do that. Or not he, but that the railroad would be back in place. You have the two interstates, normally called ports to plane, but it's I-27 and I-14. In your life, how fast is 20 years past? I mean, they go
pretty
like
quick.
They go in a heartbeat.
I just turned 40, so
so from that
I've
side,
had 2 20-year cycles in me already.
So let's finalize that. Let's get that shovel ready. Let's start buying that land. Let's start preparing that land. Let's focus on the intermediate. Organic growth is the way we do it on short term, but let's start getting medium term and long term plans, and let's follow them. And
And are those routes picked out yet?
they're done.
They're done. So I-14's coming through where? It's coming through Wall.
Cristobal.
Oh, I-14's coming.
No, you're correct. You are correct. I-27 comes.
27's north-south, right?
Yes.
Because it's Lubbock down to Del Rio, I think, right?
That's correct.
And then 14 would be coming from like the Temple area.
Yeah, Eden. Yes,
through Eden.
So it's going to come in through Eden, and then they're going to merge on the west side of San Angelo.
Merge on what is going to merge on the west side?
Well, you're going to have I-27 coming from Eden.
Okay.
And then you're going to have I-14, and then as they go around San Angelo, one's going to head toward Midland, one's going to go through Lubbock.
Okay.
But that route. Now think about all the properties that's there. Do you want it to be a Buc-ee's?
Yeah.
Could we start working with Buc-ee's to do that? Could we make it a retail? Do you want to make it a commercial property? Do you want to make it a residential? But people come, oh, that's 20 years. Well, 20 years is like tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, 20 years is not very far away.
My approach would be, let's focus on short term now. Let's really get our heads together with the council and the mayor, and then let's propose a plan that would be what is immediate. And then we go to the midterm. What could we do within the next 2 to 3 years? And then let's start looking at the long-term plans. Intermediate plans would be, are there the businesses that they're talking about now that are coming in, some of the larger corporations, but they got to bring jobs. They're not bringing enough jobs. And that's where I think that if we brought in the Angelo State, the Shannon, everything else, just think if they're always complaining that they don't have enough doctors.
Yeah.
What if this became the mecca for making doctors?
Yeah.
They did their residency here. I mean, talk about an opportunity, but until you're mayor, you can't really promote any of those ideas.
Yeah. No, very true. Very true. Are we missing any major topics that you were wanting to hit or anything like that?
No, not really, except your favorite one that I like.
What's the end one?
Yeah.
All right, we could get to it. Okay, so say you made really bad decisions in life, right? You're not running for mayor anymore. You made some horrible decisions. You just happen to find yourself on death row. Tomorrow's the last day of living. What is your last meal going to be? What are you telling the warden? What is my last meal? What is that? What's your last meal?
I would have steak, potatoes. I would have French onion soup and maybe
French onion soup. That's a good one.
And a cherry pie.
Cherry pie, really? Cherry pie out of all the pies?
Yes, I like cherry pie.
Nice. Is it the sourness or what?
I think it is. I think it's the sourness. It's that it does, because when you have steak and potato, those are kind of standard.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the meal, you have that cherry pie with a good cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Or maybe a scotch.
Okay. Nice.
But that's what
What cut of steak are you getting? What's your cut choice?
I'd get a filet mignon,
Nice.
just a little bit of red and the pink in the middle.
Yeah.
No blood.
I'm a ribeye guy all the way. Definitely a ribeye.
Ribeyes are good. I like the reason that filet over ribeye is the size.
Yeah.
I would like something a little bit smaller, a little bit more tender.
And not as much fat too, so
Yeah.
that's always an advantage. All right. Well, of course, May 3rd is election, but early voting has already happened. I think we were talking earlier. What's there already 1,200, I believe,
about 1,500.
1,500 votes. So hopefully, we're getting a lot more votes coming through, and good luck.
Well, And you're not going to touch the subject of the good old boy now.
Oh yeah, we can definitely do the good old boy one. We have all night. We can go on for 2 more hours. All right, so going back to the good old boy thing then. All right, so there's this perception in San Angelo, right, that certain people run, you know,
They're handpicked.
are handpicked, and they, you know, whatever the good old boy clubs, the good old boy club gets, you know. And of course, you know, I brought it up to Tom yesterday. I was like, well, you're kind of the good old boy. Like, if you really think about it, you've been in politics forever. You've been around it, blah, 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 blah. But really what I think people use the word good old boy, it's in my opinion, and I might be wrong, it's establishment versus non-establishment, right? And is that how you define good old boy? Or what do you use when you use the word the good old boy system in San Angelo? And when you're talking in that context, what do you mean by that?
I think the good old boy network is the network in which the establishment retains power.
Okay.
So I think it's a power thing. They don't want the power to shift.
Okay.
You know, from the 20% control the city. They don't want to shift the power or any of the power to the 80% that can make it happen. And I think that's where it is. For example, you know, if the 20% control, then they control where the money is going to be spent. The downtown area, maybe they want more money and they don't want to stop that. Maybe they want the Coliseum and they don't want you to touch their Coliseum because they want that no matter what. And in this case, when I take a look at the expense reports, tomorrow I can tell you a lot more, because Friday is the day we turn in, you know, how many donations we got. Take a look at that and then see how many people you can recognize that are part of the Rodeo Association. I looked at that and it opened my eyes as to how many people are promoting Tom, because Tom is 100% by the road. In fact, he's on record on the city council, which says one of the goals that I came into the city council 8 years ago was for this point today, was for the rodeo. I mean, for the Coliseum to be up. I mean, so he's gone on record, and so people have come back in. You know, how did he get appointed to city council? They appointed him. I mean, he came in. He didn't even have to run.
Yeah.
I mean, so every time we've done this, you know, when you take it the dollars value, I'm predicting, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm predicting he's going to get $60,000 to $70,000. And I'm going to, in my conscience, I can't spend more than $12,000. I think money is too precious for too many, but that means that where he's going to gain the upper hand on me and Gary is he's going to use every media he's got. I've already seen him on billboards. He's on the radio. I understand he's got television commercials. He's going to have 3 times the signs that Gary and I have. That's what dollars do. And in fact, they were saying that unless you blow it somehow, most elections are decided by who has the most money. You know, he's paying for 2 or 3 people to run his campaign. I can't afford any of that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I could afford it. I could come back out and fork the money out, but I don't think it's a good way to do that. Trinidad's view of the world would be that we came out and said the maximum mayor candidate can do in the future is $25,000. You know, in football, I don't know if you follow football, basketball, any of the sports, there's rules.
Yeah. I like that idea.
And so a cap. We give a cap. And then that way you're going to base me or Gary or Tom on qualifications.
Yeah, I'll take one more if you don't like.
On qualifications.
Yeah.
Not on spending rates. So, I mean, right now, no matter where you turn, you go to San Angelo Live. Oh my God, you can't even go to the next article because, you know,
there's just so much advertising on San Angelo Live these days, isn't there?
Yeah, well, not mine. I mean, you know, I've talked to, you know, it's face everything, but it's one of those things that without spending caps, it'll never be a good race.
Yeah, I actually do like that idea. I think that's smart.
And then he's figured out a way that, you know, when I was back in, we said 15, when we rewrote the charter, he's found a way to stay in office longer. So theoretically, he could go to council, do 8 years, go to mayor, do 8 years, and go to council, do 8 years, go back. So he could come in and do a full term forever and not ever lose.
We'll never get rid of the good old boy network then, huh?
Yeah, I mean, but you know, it's been done. Mayor Lone proved it.
Yeah.
And there was others that came in and they they approved that the Good Old Boy Network, or they used to call it the Lakeview Mafia,
Ah,
whatever they called it back in the days. And, that's the same little,
the
but,
Lakeview Mafia. I like that better than the
the Good
than
Old
the
Boy.
Good Old Boy
But,
Network.
to be honest with you, I knew those guys. I know Steve Stevens real well. I know, those folks are good people. I knew Hirschfield, David, and I would have coffee together.
Yeah.
So I know the network. They're good people, but in this case, they know that, or
Thank you so much.
they suspect that Gary will, continue. Because let's say the Coliseum, since you and I are canceling each other out, let's say the Coliseum doesn't get put in. What happens next? If he's being
We just
selected,
get less competitive in the rodeo space,
well,
I assume. I don't. I mean, I don't know.
but do they bring it back up in 5 years or 3 years, or
Yeah.
which I think
Do
would
you have
be
any thoughts on the convention center expansion? I know that's bubbling below the surface.
Um, they want to raise the taxes to 4% on the sales tax for the hotel motel. So that's
You mean
what
you're talking about on
occupancy
hotel
tax.
occupancy tax,
So they
which
want
is not a burden at all to the citizens of San Angelo unless you stay in a hotel.
right, and it would be minimal impact to the people coming into the sports programs and everything else. So I think that they found a way to cover that. The only thing I didn't like was they came back. And they approved to look into, increasing the size or remodeling the convention center. And immediately the staff came up and said, "Oh, I already have the renderings. I already have the pictures. I'll turn it over to the contract that's going to do it." Wait a minute, we just approved it 5 minutes ago. How can you have all of that?
Yeah, yeah,
And so, those are the things that I don't appreciate.
yeah.
Those people should have been working, you know, and I'll pick on the animal shelter. They should have been working on the animal shelter. They should have been working on the parks. They should have been working on the new police station. But instead, this was brand new and it was already done.
So what I'm hearing from you is a vote for you is a vote against the Good Old Boy Network.
Yes, it's
Clear enough?
it's a change. It's the change that I believe uh, needs to happen. And they've already, I mean, they've turned on me to some degree. Those guys are still my friends, and they will always be my friends. We've agreed to disagree. They believe that the changes that I will bring to San Angelo may deter some of the things they won't. It doesn't mean that they dislike me. I've known these gentlemen for years and years. I mean, so we'll agree to disagree,
Yeah,
and they're just not for me because they're concerned that I will make some changes as we talked about. Well, I'd make some cuts.
yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't have, we'd come in and we'd revamp it. I'd find a way to get the taxes down. I would go back to a zero budget, or take a look at something close by.
Okay. All right. So to recap on the cuts, you're looking to cut here and there, but it's a complicated subject in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
Revenue-wise, on the sales, you're somewhat interested or concerned with the fact that there's a bunch of nonprofits that are not paying anything.
Now, I'm for following the law.
Yeah.
And so from the nonprofits on the tiers money, yes, different subject. Yes, I am concerned, and I would get them together into a room and get the five that we talked about and say, guys, can you help the citizens?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that I know them all. I don't know the new Goodfellow Air Force Base commander, but the rest of them I do know fairly well. And I think they'll all come to the table. I've talked to General Hawkins several times, or now President Hawkins, and he's susceptible. Kane's a good man from Shannon. So I think all of them would step up if you ask them to.
Yeah.
They're good people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. It's been a good conversation, and
I
thank you
enjoyed
for gracing your presence here
Ooh.
with a few drinks. But thank you so much, and good luck on May 3rd. And thank you for sitting down with me.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and what I'm trying to do is create the difference so that people will understand that, do they want to stay current mode, or do they believe that we do need to make a difference?
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully we can get some people out May 3rd. Vote. I mean, the sad part is last year I think we only had 3,000 people vote. I mean, last mayoral cycle only had 3,000 people vote, so we're already halfway to that number. So hopefully we'll get a bigger number than 3,000 this year.
And I think the bonds will drive it. I'm predicting 7,000 to 8,000.
Nice, even better. So
Yep.
go vote May 3rd.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it.
Uh-huh.